The chain screamed. Metal groaned against frozen stone as a young Omega girl dangled above a darkness so deep that even sunlight refused to touch its bottom. Snow whipped across the cliff. Hundreds watched. Some prayed. Most waited for her to die. Far below, inside the cursed abyss, something growled. Not a wolf. Not a beast. Something older. Something that had survived centuries beneath the ice. The Alpha King's legendary great wolf had fallen into the Ravine of Endless Ice 3 days ago. No warrior had volunteered. No hunter had dared. No noble had risked their life. Yet somehow the kingdom's weakest Omega girl now hung between life and death, while the most feared ruler in the world watched from above. Then it happened. A pulse of silver light exploded beneath the ice. The chains trembled. The wolf roared. And for one impossible second, the Alpha King felt his own heart stop. Because the ravine was not awakening for the wolf. It was awakening for her. And before this winter ended, one Omega girl would either save the kingdom or destroy everything the Alpha King had left to lose. Instead, she lifted a trembling hand. The wolf could crush her skull in seconds. Yet she touched his fur. The world stopped. A pulse moved beneath her fingers. Warm. Ancient. Alive. Fenrir's eyes widened. Then slowly, the beast lowered his head, accepting her touch, accepting her. Above the ravine, a new figure arrived. The crowd immediately bowed. Fear spread through the platform. King Kael Draven had come. The Alpha King stepped toward the cliff edge. Black fur cloak. Cold silver eyes. Power radiating from every movement. Then he looked down and witnessed something impossible. Fenrir, his wolf, his soul, resting beneath the touch of a stranger. For the first time in years, hope entered the king's heart. Far below, Lyra began clearing ice from Fenrir's trapped leg. Stone shifted. Frozen debris cracked. The wolf pulled free. A roar exploded through the ravine. Ice shattered. Snow cascaded from the cliffs. And, beneath the broken ice, something ancient awakened. A glowing silver symbol suddenly appeared beneath Lyra's feet. The light spread through frozen cracks. The ravine trembled. Fenrir stepped backward. Not in fear, in recognition. And high above, the Alpha King's expression changed. Because he knew that symbol. A symbol believed extinct for centuries. The mark of the Moon Queens. The mark of prophecy. The mark that should not exist. Yet it glowed beneath an Omega girl standing at the bottom of the abyss. And somewhere deep below the ice, something else began opening its eyes. Instead, she lifted a trembling hand. The wolf could crush her skull in seconds. Yet she touched his fur. The world stopped. A pulse moved beneath her fingers. Warm. Ancient. Alive. Fenrir's eyes widened. Then slowly, the beast lowered his head, accepting her touch, accepting her. Above the ravine, a new figure arrived. The crowd immediately bowed. Fear spread through the platform. King Kael Draven had come. The Alpha King stepped toward the cliff edge. Black fur cloak. Cold silver eyes. Power radiating from every movement. Then he looked down and witnessed something impossible. Fenrir, his wolf, his soul, resting beneath the touch of a stranger. For the first time in years, hope entered the king's heart. Far below, Lyra began clearing ice from Fenrir's trapped leg. Stone shifted. Frozen debris cracked. The wolf pulled free. A roar exploded through the ravine. Ice shattered. Snow cascaded from the cliffs. And, beneath the broken ice, something ancient awakened. A glowing silver symbol suddenly appeared beneath Lyra's feet. The light spread through frozen cracks. The ravine trembled. Fenrir stepped backward. Not in fear, in recognition. And high above, the Alpha King's expression changed. Because he knew that symbol. A symbol believed extinct for centuries. The mark of the Moon Queens. The mark of prophecy. The mark that should not exist. Yet it glowed beneath an Omega girl standing at the bottom of the abyss. And somewhere deep below the ice, something else began opening its eyes. The ravine would not leave the Alpha King's thoughts. Not the glowing symbol. Not the impossible light beneath the ice. And certainly not the Omega girl. 3 days had passed since Fenrir's rescue. 3 sleepless nights. 3 endless dawns haunted by silver eyes and unanswered questions. Yet even now, standing before the throne inside Frostfang Palace, Kael Draven could still see her face. The memory irritated him, because kings did not obsess over strangers. Especially not Omegas. Especially not after what had happened years ago. Outside the palace, winter storms battered ancient stone walls. Inside, firelight danced across black marble columns. Nobles filled the royal court. Whispers drifted through the room. Everyone waited for the same thing. The Omega girl who saved the great wolf. At the far end of the hall, enormous doors opened. Silence followed. Lyra stepped inside. The contrast was almost absurd. Golden nobles wrapped in silk and jewels surrounded her. Yet she wore the same simple clothes she had arrived in. The same worn boots. The same patched cloak. Nothing about her looked royal. Nothing about her looked important. And yet every eye followed her. Because somehow this insignificant Omega had done what none of them dared attempt. The atmosphere tightened. Lyra felt it immediately. Judgment. Resentment. Curiosity. The court wasn't looking at a hero. They were looking at a threat. Her heart pounded as she approached the throne. Then she saw him. King Kael. The ruler looked even more intimidating indoors. The throne itself seemed too small for him. Power surrounded him like a living thing. Cold. Heavy. Dangerous. Silver eyes locked onto hers. For a moment neither spoke. The entire hall seemed frozen between breaths. Then Kael finally broke the silence. You saved him. His voice rolled through the chamber like distant thunder. Simple words. Yet somehow impossible to ignore. Lyra lowered her head. I only did what anyone should have done. Murmurs erupted throughout the court. Several nobles openly scoffed. Anyone should have done? Nobody had volunteered. Nobody except her. Kael watched her carefully. Most people lied to kings. Most people chased rewards. Power. Status. Recognition. But Lyra's scent carried no ambition. Only nervousness. And something else. Something strangely familiar. The realization unsettled him. Raise your head. Lyra obeyed. Their eyes met again. For a brief second, the entire room disappeared. The nobles. The throne. The court. Everything. Only silence remained. Then an explosion shattered the moment. A growl. Deep. Territorial. Dangerous. Fenrir had entered the hall. Gasps erupted. The massive wolf strode forward. Silver fur gleaming beneath torchlight. Powerful muscles rolling beneath his coat. Servants quickly moved aside. Nobody dared block his path. The great wolf ignored everyone. Ignored guards. Ignored nobles. Ignored the king. Instead, he walked directly toward Lyra. The hall fell silent. Fenrir stopped beside her. Then sat. As if he belonged there. As if he had chosen her. Shock rippled across every face. One noble nearly dropped his wine. Another crossed himself in fear. The great wolf had never bonded with anyone besides the Alpha King. Never. Yet now he sat beside an Omega girl, watching everyone with protective eyes. Kael's jaw tightened. Something deep inside him reacted. Not anger. Not exactly. Something stranger. A feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Jealousy. The realization irritated him immediately. Ridiculous. Fenrir was a wolf. Nothing more. Yet somehow seeing the beast choose Lyra created a strange ache inside his chest. As though something important was shifting beyond his control. The sensation vanished when Fenrir suddenly rose. The wolf moved closer. Then rested his enormous head against Lyra's shoulder. The entire court gasped. Lyra froze. Her eyes widened. Slowly she reached upward. Her fingers brushed silver fur. Fenrir immediately relaxed. A low rumble escaped his chest. Not a growl. Contentment. The impossible scene unfolded before hundreds of witnesses. And nobody knew what it meant. Least of all Kael. Hours later the palace remained restless. Rumors spread through corridors. Servants whispered. Nobles speculated. Meanwhile, Lyra sat alone inside a guest chamber larger than her family's entire home. Moonlight spilled through tall windows. Everything felt unreal. The palace, the king, Fenrir, the prophecy symbol beneath the ice. Questions circled endlessly inside her mind. Then came a knock. Before she could answer, the door opened. Fenrir entered. The giant wolf crossed the room, lay beside her bed, and refused to leave. Lyra blinked. "You can't stay here." Fenrir closed one eye, ignoring her completely. A reluctant laugh escaped her lips. The sound surprised even herself, because she couldn't remember the last time she laughed. Outside the room, hidden in shadows, Kael watched the scene. The wolf had ignored every command, every order, every attempt to separate them. Nothing worked. It made no sense. And yet the sight of Lyra smiling beside Fenrir stirred something unexpected inside him. Something warm, dangerously warm. That night the Alpha King suffered another nightmare. The same nightmare that haunted him for years. His dead mate. Blood on marble floors. Her final scream. His failure. The guilt. The helplessness. He woke violently, breathing hard, sweat covering his skin. The darkness felt suffocating, like it always did. Except this time something was different. The nightmare ended sooner. The pain faded faster. The loneliness felt weaker, as though some invisible force had softened the edges of his suffering. Hours later, unable to sleep, Kael wandered through silent corridors. Then he saw light beneath a doorway. Lyra's room. The king hesitated. A strange impulse pulled him forward. When he quietly opened the door, he found her asleep beside Fenrir. Moonlight illuminated the room. Silver light touched her face. Fenrir rested protectively nearby. Peace filled the space. Real peace. The kind Kael had not felt in years. For reasons he could not understand, simply standing there eased something inside him. The tension in his chest loosened. His breathing steadied. The constant ache dulled. And for the first time since his mate's death, the darkness retreated. Only slightly, but enough. Enough to terrify him. Because no one should possess that kind of influence over him. Especially not an Omega. Especially not a stranger. Across the palace, another woman watched events unfold with growing alarm. Duchess Seraphine Vale stood inside the royal archives. Ancient books covered the table before her. Candles flickered. Shadows danced. Hours of searching had finally revealed what she feared. Her elegant fingers slowly turned a fragile page, then stopped. A portrait stared back at her. A forgotten queen. Silver eyes. Dark hair. Moon markings. The resemblance struck immediately. Seraphine's expression darkened. She lowered her gaze to the ancient text beneath the image, and felt cold spread through her veins. Because the records described a bloodline thought extinct centuries ago. The bloodline of the Moon Queens. The bloodline destined to stand beside the Wolf King. The bloodline connected to the symbol witnessed beneath the ravine. Connected to prophecy. Connected to power. Connected to Lyra. For several seconds the Duchess simply stared. Then slowly she smiled. Not a pleasant smile. Not a kind one. A predator's smile. Because she suddenly understood something important. The Omega Girl was not merely a problem. She was a threat to everything Seraphine had spent years building. Everything. And if Lyra truly carried royal blood, then removing her would require far more than simple court gossip. Closing the ancient book, Seraphine looked toward the palace windows where snow continued falling beyond the glass. A storm was coming. Not from the sky. From the court itself. And before winter ended, one of them would be destroyed. Lyra. Or her. The game had officially begun. Winter tightened its grip around Frostfang Palace. Snow fell day and night. The kingdom slept beneath endless, white skies. But inside the royal court, something far more dangerous than winter was spreading. Whispers. Invisible. Silent. Deadly. And like poison dropped into water, they traveled everywhere. It began with servants. A stolen glance here. A suspicious rumor there. Nothing obvious. Nothing dramatic. Only tiny seeds of doubt. Yet doubt was all Duchess Seraphine needed. Because doubt grew. And once it grew, it became impossible to control. especially inside a palace built upon fear. Days passed. Lyra noticed the changes first. Not because someone accused her directly, because people stopped smiling. Servants who once greeted her now lowered their eyes. Nobles who had politely tolerated her suddenly whispered when she walked past. Even palace guards seemed uncomfortable around her. The shift was subtle, but impossible to ignore, and she had no idea why. One afternoon, she crossed the western courtyard carrying medicine for an injured stable wolf. Conversations stopped immediately. Several noble women stared openly. One laughed. The others followed. Lyra continued walking, pretending not to hear, pretending not to care. But every whispered word landed like a knife. Omega. Manipulative. Ambitious. Gold digger. Witch. The insults varied. The hatred remained the same. By sunset, the entire palace felt colder than the storm outside. Meanwhile, hidden within her private chambers, Seraphine smiled. Everything was progressing perfectly. A queen did not need swords to destroy enemies. Only patience. And understanding. People rarely believed truth. People believed fear. That was why kingdoms fell. That was why rulers died. And that was why Lyra would eventually break. The Duchess moved toward a large table covered in letters and reports. Several servants stood nearby awaiting instructions. One knelt before her. Your Grace. Seraphine accepted a sealed document, carefully opened it. Read. Then smiled wider. The trap was tightening, exactly as planned. Continue spreading the rumors. The servant nodded. And the Omega girl? Seraphine's eyes darkened. Make certain she feels alone. The servant bowed lower. As you command. Far away, completely unaware of the growing conspiracy, Lyra stood upon a palace balcony, overlooking the frozen city. Night had fallen. Thousands of lights glowed beneath the snow. The sight should have been beautiful. Instead, she felt lonely, confused, exhausted. Her breath drifted through the cold air. Behind her, soft footsteps approached. She already knew who it was. Fenrir. The giant wolf stepped beside her, golden eyes glowing beneath moonlight. Without speaking, Lyra rested her hand against his thick fur. The wolf immediately relaxed. A low rumble echoed from his chest. Comfort, understanding, presence, the things she desperately needed. You don't judge me. The words escaped quietly. Fenrir blinked, as if agreeing. A small smile touched her lips. Then another voice emerged from behind them. Deep, controlled, dangerous. Most people judge what they don't understand. Lyra froze. The smile vanished. Because only one man possessed a voice capable of changing the atmosphere of an entire room. King Kael. The Alpha King stepped onto the balcony. Black cloak shifting behind him. Silver eyes reflecting moonlight. Power surrounded him naturally. Like breathing. Like gravity. And yet something about him seemed different lately. Softer. Not outwardly. Not visibly. But somehow she sensed it. The walls around him weren't quite as high. The silence stretched. Neither knew what to say. Neither wanted to leave. Which somehow made everything worse. Finally, Lyra lowered her gaze. Your people don't seem happy I'm here. Kael's jaw tightened. He already knew. He had noticed the whispers. The stares. The hostility. The court always feared outsiders. Especially Omegas. Especially important Omegas. They fear change. Lyra laughed softly. A sad laugh. I'm hardly important enough to change anything. Something flashed through Kael's eyes. A strange emotion. Almost anger. But not directed at her. Directed at the statement itself. Because somehow hearing her belittle herself felt wrong. Very wrong. You saved Fenrir. His voice became quieter. More personal. You changed everything. Their eyes met. The air shifted. Something invisible moved between them. Dangerous. Magnetic. Neither fully understood it. Neither wanted to acknowledge it. Yet it continued growing. Day after day. Moment after moment. Like a fire slowly consuming dry wood. Fenrir suddenly rose. The wolf glanced between them. Then deliberately walked away. Leaving them alone. Lyra stared after him. Traitor. The thought nearly made her laugh. Kael watched the disappearing wolf. Then sighed. A rare sound. Human. Tired. For a moment Lyra forgot. She stood beside a king. Instead she saw a man carrying unbearable weight. A man exhausted from years of grief. A man desperately pretending he wasn't broken. The realization hurt unexpectedly. Because beneath the crown, beneath the power, beneath the fear, he looked lonely. Terribly lonely. You haven't slept. The observation escaped before she could stop it. Kael stiffened. Surprise crossed his features. Nobody noticed things like that. Nobody dared. Yet she had. Again. Lyra immediately regretted speaking. Until Kael quietly answered.
No.
The single word carried years of suffering. Years of nightmares. Years of guilt. The honesty startled both of them. Silence followed. Heavy. Intimate. Then slowly Lyra stepped closer. Not enough to touch him. Just enough to be heard. The nightmares again?
Kael stared. How?
How did she keep seeing things nobody else saw? Why did she always notice the wounds hidden beneath the armor? And why did it feel strangely relieving? The answer frightened him. Because he wanted to tell her. Wanted to speak. Wanted to trust. After years of isolation. After years of believing trust only led to betrayal. He wanted her. Not physically. Not yet. Something deeper. More dangerous. He wanted her understanding. The realization terrified him. So he stepped back. Walls rising again. Defenses rebuilding. The Alpha King returned. Cold. Controlled. Untouchable. I should return to work. Disappointment flickered through Lyra's chest. Brief. Sharp. Unexpected. Kael turned away. Yet before leaving, he paused. Just once. Without looking back. The nightmares are quieter when you're nearby. The confession barely reached a whisper. Then he disappeared into the darkness, leaving Lyra completely still. Heart racing. Breath caught. Because somehow those 7 words felt more intimate than a declaration of love. And neither of them understood what that meant. Unfortunately, someone else had witnessed everything. From a distant corridor hidden behind stone arches, Seraphine watched the entire interaction. Every glance. Every silence. Every moment. Rage coiled inside her chest.
Years.
She had spent years positioning herself beside the throne. Years earning influence. Years manipulating nobles. Years waiting for Kael to finally choose her. Yet a village Omega had achieved more in weeks than she had in a decade. Unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. That night Seraphine descended into the palace archives. Ancient records surrounded her. Dust covered forgotten shelves. Candles flickered weakly. The Duchess stopped beside a hidden cabinet. Unlocked it. Removed a sealed collection of documents. Records connected to the death of Kael's former mate. The greatest tragedy of his life. The deepest wound in his soul. Slowly she opened the file. Studied every page. Every name. Every detail. And then inspiration struck. A horrifyingly perfect idea. Because Kael's greatest weakness had never been love. It had been fear. Fear of losing someone again. Fear of betrayal. Fear of trusting the wrong person. And Seraphine suddenly realized exactly how to use that fear. By midnight, forged letters were already being prepared. False evidence. False witnesses. False accusations. All pointing toward one devastating conclusion. That Lyra Ashbourne was secretly connected to enemy kingdoms. That she had manipulated her way into the palace. That she was planning betrayal. The lies were ridiculous. But truth didn't matter. Not when fear was involved. And as Seraphine sealed the final forged document, a cold smile touched her lips. Because she knew exactly where the poison needed to strike. Not Lyra's reputation. Not her safety. Not her future. Her relationship with Kael. Destroy the trust. And everything else would collapse naturally. Outside the archives, thunder rolled across the mountains. A storm was approaching. And before dawn arrived, the first piece of evidence would find its way into royal hands. Unaware of the danger, Lyra slept peacefully beside Fenrir. unaware that her enemies had already begun writing the story of her downfall. And somewhere deep within the palace, a royal guard discovered proof that could expose Seraphine's entire conspiracy. Proof powerful enough to save Lyra. Proof powerful enough to change everything. But before he could reach the throne, a shadow emerged behind him. Steel flashed in darkness, and blood splattered across cold stone. The guard never had time to scream. The kingdom woke to blood. Not war. Not rebellion. Something worse. A murder inside the royal palace. The dead guard was discovered before sunrise. His body lay in a deserted corridor beneath the eastern tower. Snow had blown through an open window. White flakes covered crimson stains. A frozen silence settled over the scene. Because everyone knew the guard. Everyone knew his loyalty. And everyone knew he had been carrying confidential documents meant for the throne. Documents that had vanished. Documents nobody could find. Documents that died with him. By noon, rumors had consumed the palace. By evening, accusations followed. And at the center of every whisper stood one name. Lyra Ashbourne. Outside, winter storms battered Frostfang kingdom. Inside, the royal court prepared for judgment. The throne room felt colder than the frozen world beyond its walls. Thousands of candles burned, yet somehow darkness remained. Nobles packed the chamber. Generals lined the walls. Servants stood motionless. Nobody spoke above a whisper. Everyone sensed disaster approaching. At the far end of the hall stood Lyra. Alone. For the first time since arriving at the palace. Truly alone. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Confusion churned inside her stomach. She still didn't fully understand what was happening. Letters had appeared. Witnesses had emerged. Evidence had surfaced. All pointing toward the same accusation. Treason. Espionage. Collusion with enemy kingdoms. The allegations sounded insane. Yet somehow the court believed them.
Or perhaps they simply wanted to.
Because the truth was far less convenient than fear. At the center of the chamber sat King Kael. Motionless.
Silent.
Unreadable. The throne seemed carved from ice beneath him. Silver eyes fixed upon the evidence spread across a black marble table. Forged letters. False reports. Invented testimonies. Every lie carefully designed to look real. And worst of all, the evidence resembled another collection of documents. Documents from years ago. Documents connected to the death of his mate. The resemblance wasn't accidental. Seraphine had made certain of that. Every detail. Every wound. Every memory. Reopened. Kael felt it happening. The old pain. The old fear. The old nightmare. A part of him wanted to reject everything. Wanted to burn the evidence. Wanted to trust Lyra. But trust had destroyed him once already. The memory of blood-covered marble flashed through his mind. His mate's final breath. His failure. His helplessness. And suddenly, he wasn't looking at Lyra anymore. He was looking at history repeating itself. Exactly as Seraphine intended. Lyra finally found her voice. This isn't true. The words echoed through the hall. Nobody answered. Nobody moved. Only silence greeted her. Her gaze shifted toward Kael. Toward the one person she believed would understand. The one person who knew her. The one person who had seen her heart. Kael. The name escaped before she realized what she had done. Gasps spread across the chamber. A common Omega speaking the king's name. Without title. Without permission. Without fear. Yet neither noticed. Because the world had narrowed to a single moment. A single question. Would he believe her? Kael's chest tightened. The sound of his name from her lips felt painfully familiar. Painfully human. For a brief second, he almost stood. Almost crossed the room. Almost chose trust. Then his eyes fell upon the forged letters again. Fear won. Just as Seraphine knew it would. His expression hardened. The walls returned. The king replaced the man. And Lyra felt her heart begin to break. The evidence is overwhelming. His voice sounded distant.
Cold.
Controlled. Like a blade. The words struck harder than any physical wound. Because she wasn't hearing a king speak. She was hearing someone she trusted choosed out. Something inside her shattered.
Slowly.
Quietly, irreversibly. Across the chamber, Seraphine lowered her gaze to hide her smile. Victory tasted sweet. Years of planning, years of patience, all leading here. The Omega was losing. And the king didn't even realize it. Perfect. Lyra stared at Kael, waiting,
Hoping. Praying.
for something, anything. A sign, a glance, a hint that he still believed in her. None came. Only silence. The cruelest answer of all. Her eyes burned. Tears threatened. But she refused to cry. Not here. Not before them. Not before him. Because somehow that hurt even more. The fact that she still cared. The fact that despite everything, she still wanted him to trust her. Finally, the judgment arrived. The entire court held its breath. Kael rose from the throne. The movement alone silenced the room. Storm clouds growled beyond stained glass windows. The Alpha King looked down at the Omega girl who had saved his soul. And condemned her. Lyra Ashbourne. The title sounded like a funeral bell. You are hereby exiled from Frostfang Kingdom. The words landed, and the world stopped. Even the storm seemed to pause. Lyra simply stared, unable to breathe, unable to think, unable to comprehend what she had just heard. Exile. Not imprisonment. Not execution. Something worse. Abandonment. Erasure. The sentence meant she no longer belonged anywhere. The realization hollowed her from the inside. Not because she feared the wilderness. Not because she feared death. Because the one person she trusted had chosen to let her go. Fenrir roared. The sound exploded through the throne room. Windows rattled. Candles flickered. Nobles recoiled in terror. The great wolf surged forward. Fury radiating from every muscle. He knew. Instinctively. The wolf understood something terrible was happening. Guards stepped between them. Fenrir snarled. Teeth flashed. The entire palace seemed moments away from chaos. Yet Kael raised a hand. The wolf froze. A command. A king's authority. For several agonizing seconds Fenrir stared at Kael, then at Lyra, then back again. Confusion filled ancient golden eyes. The wolf couldn't understand.
Neither could she.
Hours later the palace gates opened. Snow fell heavily. Night swallowed the world. Lyra stood beyond the walls carrying only a small pack. Nothing else. No allies. No home. No future. Behind her stood the kingdom. Ahead waited endless wilderness. For several seconds, she remained motionless.
Hoping.
Still hoping. That someone would stop her. That someone would come. That someone would say it was all a mistake. Nobody came. Not even him. The gates slowly closed. The sound echoed like a final heartbeat. And with that, the last piece of her old life disappeared. Far above the city walls, hidden in darkness, Kael watched. Every instinct screamed at him. Go after her.
Stop this.
Fix it. Yet he remained frozen, trapped between fear and regret. The moment stretched, then vanished. Lyra disappeared into the storm. And for reasons he couldn't explain, the world suddenly felt empty. The consequences arrived immediately. Within days, Fenrir stopped eating. The great wolf wandered palace corridors searching endlessly. Restless. Agitated.
Heartbroken.
At night, he sat beside Lyra's abandoned room, waiting. The sight disturbed everyone, especially Kael, because he recognized the feeling. He was doing the same thing, just differently. Weeks passed, then months. The kingdom slowly darkened. Corruption spread. Fear returned. Nightmares intensified. Kael slept less, ate less, spoke less. The loneliness he thought he had mastered came roaring back stronger than ever. And every time he closed his eyes, he saw snow, a closed gate, and an Omega girl walking away. Meanwhile, beyond the frozen frontier, Lyra survived.
Barely.
Blizzards nearly killed her. Hunger stalked her. Wolves hunted her. Yet somehow she endured. Day after brutal day. Night after endless night. Something inside her refused to die. The pain transformed. Not disappearing. Changing. Becoming strength. One evening while fleeing a snowstorm, she discovered ancient ruins buried beneath ice. Massive silver pillars emerged from frozen earth. Moon symbols covered shattered stone. A strange familiarity pulled her forward, as if the ruins remembered her, as if they had been waiting. The moment she crossed the threshold, the symbol from the ravine erupted across the floor. Silver light flooded the chamber. Ancient voices whispered through darkness. And for the first time in her life, Lyra saw the truth. She was not merely an Omega. She was the last descendant of the Moon Queens. The lost bloodline of prophecy. The bloodline destined to stand beside the Wolf King. The bloodline erased from history. Tears filled her eyes. Not from sadness. From realization. All her life, she had believed she was weak, unwanted, forgettable. Yet destiny itself carried her name. And then the final truth emerged. A memory preserved within ancient magic. Images flashed before her. A woman. A crown.
Blood.
Betrayal. And one familiar face. Seraphine. Lyra staggered backward. Her breathing stopped, because the vision revealed everything. The lies. The conspiracy. The exile. Even the death of Kael's former mate. Seraphine had orchestrated it all. Years ago. And now again. The realization shook the ruins. Literally. Silver light exploded through ancient stone. The prophecy awakened completely. And somewhere far away inside Frostfang Palace, Fenrir suddenly lifted his head, as if sensing the change, as if sensing her, as if knowing that the girl who left as prey would someday return as something far more dangerous, something kings and kingdoms would never forget. 3 years later, the kingdom no longer resembled the land Lyra had left behind. Winter still covered Frostfang. Snow still buried rooftops. Ice still clung to castle walls. But something far colder had settled over the kingdom. Fear. The people spoke carefully now. Heads lowered when soldiers passed. Merchants paid impossible taxes. Villages starved. Nobles fought among themselves. And everywhere rumors spread. Rumors of a mysterious woman beyond the northern frontier. A woman who commanded wolves. A woman who united clans that had hated each other for centuries. A woman who defeated warlords without armies. A woman known only as the Ice Queen. Nobody knew where she came from. Nobody knew her true name. Only that wherever she walked, enemies vanished and hope returned. And slowly, the legend traveled south. Toward Frostfang. Toward destiny. Toward the king who still dreamed of a girl lost in snow. King Kael Draven stood alone in the highest tower of Frostfang Palace. The room was dark, cold,
Silent.
much like him. The years had not been kind. Power still surrounded him. Strength still radiated from his presence. But something essential had changed. Regret. It lived inside him now, like a wound that never healed. Every morning he woke with it. Every night he slept beside it. And every time snow touched the palace windows, he remembered. A girl standing at the gates, waiting for him, believing in him, until he failed her. The memory haunted him more effectively than any nightmare. Because, unlike nightmares, this one was real. Behind him came the sound of claws against stone. Fenrir entered the tower. The great wolf looked older. Not weaker, just sadder. Golden eyes carried the same emptiness Kael felt. The wolf crossed the room, stopped beside the window, and stared north. Always north. Always searching. 3 years. And still he searched. Kael clenched his jaw. She's gone. The words felt hollow. Fenrir didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't believe him. The wolf simply continued staring toward distant mountains. Waiting. As if he knew something Kael didn't. Far beyond those mountains. A blizzard swept across frozen plains. Winds howled. Snow danced through darkness. And at the center of the storm rode a woman dressed in silver and white. Wolves ran beside her. Dozens of them. Massive beasts with glowing eyes. Ancient creatures. Predators. Protectors. Followers. The woman guided them, effortlessly. Confidently. Powerfully. Nothing remained of the frightened Omega girl who once trembled above the abyss. That version of Lyra Ashbourne no longer existed. The wilderness had destroyed her, then rebuilt her. Stronger, sharper, unbreakable. Moonlight shimmered across silver markings now visible along her skin. Ancient symbols, royal symbols, the mark of the Moon Queens, the mark of prophecy, the mark of destiny. A queen hidden inside a forgotten girl. Finally awakened, the northern clans gathered around enormous bonfires that night. Hundreds waited. Warriors, hunters, families,
Children.
all watching the woman seated upon an ice-carved throne. Respect filled every face. Trust filled every eye. Because Lyra had done something impossible. She gave them hope. Something Frostfang Kingdom had stolen long ago. The crowd fell silent as an old scout arrived breathless from the south. Snow covered his cloak. Exhaustion lined his face. Yet urgency burned in his eyes. My queen. The title still felt strange. Yet nobody questioned it. The scout dropped to one knee. News from Frostfang. The atmosphere immediately changed. Lyra's expression remained calm. But deep inside, something tightened. Because despite everything, despite betrayal, despite exile, part of her still cared. Part of her always would. The scout swallowed. The kingdom is collapsing. Murmurs spread. The nobles are fighting openly. More whispers followed. Then came the final blow. The people blame the king. Silence. Complete silence. Lyra looked into the fire. Flames reflected in silver eyes. And suddenly she remembered another fire. Years ago. A palace balcony. A lonely king. A broken man pretending not to be broken. The memory hurt. Less than before. But it still hurt. Because healing did not erase scars. It simply taught people how to carry them. Meanwhile, inside Frostfang Palace, Duchess Seraphine stood before a mirror.
Smiling.
3 years of manipulation had transformed her into the kingdom's most powerful noble. Exactly as planned. The king trusted nobody. The court remained divided. And slowly, control drifted toward her hands. Yet despite every victory, one problem remained.
Kael.
He still refused to choose her. Still refused marriage. Still refused the future she wanted. His heart remained trapped in the past. Trapped by an Omega girl who should have disappeared forever. The thought filled her with rage. Years later, and still Lyra haunted him. Unacceptable. The next morning, everything changed. Because Frostfang's gates opened. And destiny finally returned home. Snow drifted across the capital as thousands filled the streets. Nobody understood why crowds gathered. Nobody understood why excitement spread. Then the Northern Army appeared. Not an invading force. A procession. Wolves moved through the snow.
Dozens of them.
Massive creatures. Ancient creatures. Beautiful creatures. And at their center, a woman. The city fell silent. Merchants stopped speaking. Children stopped running. Soldiers froze. Because nobody recognized her. Yet somehow, everyone did. Long dark hair moved with the wind. Silver markings glowed faintly against pale skin. Royal authority surrounded her naturally. Not borrowed. Not earned. Inherited. She rode through the city, like winter itself had taken human form. And suddenly whispers spread. Then gasps. Then shock. One name traveled through the crowd. Lyra. Lyra Ashbourne. The Omega girl. The Exile. The Forgotten One. Returned. High above the city walls, Kael heard the commotion. He stepped onto a balcony. Annoyed. Distracted. Expecting another political problem. Then he saw her. And the world stopped. Everything stopped.
The city.
The noise. The snow. His breathing. His heartbeat. Everything. Because standing below was the woman he thought he'd lost forever. Only she wasn't the same. Not even close. The frightened girl was gone. In her place stood a queen. Power radiated from her effortlessly. Confidence moved through every gesture. Strength lived inside every glance. She had survived without him. Thrived without him. Become extraordinary without him. And somehow that realization hurt more than any wound he'd ever received. Because it forced him to confront a terrible truth. She never needed saving.
He did.
Far below, Lyra slowly lifted her gaze. Across impossible distance, their eyes met. 3 years of pain crashed into a single moment. Regret, anger, longing, heartbreak,
Love.
everything returned. Nothing healed. Everything healed. The contradiction nearly stole Kael's breath. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Lyra offered a polite bow. Formal, respectful, distant. The gesture shattered something inside him. Because once upon a time, she had looked at him differently. Warmly. Hopefully. Now she looked at him like a stranger. And he had nobody to blame except himself. That night Kael requested a private meeting. The invitation arrived immediately. Lyra accepted. Not because she forgave him. Because she had returned for a reason. A purpose greater than old wounds. Yet, as she entered the royal chamber, the tension felt unbearable. The room seemed smaller. The air heavier. The memories louder. Kael stood near the window. Waiting. Nervous. A feeling he had not experienced in years. Not during wars. Not during assassinations. Not during battles. Only now. Only with her. For a long moment neither spoke. Finally Kael broke first. You're alive. The words sounded pathetic the moment they left him. Lyra's expression didn't change. That tends to happen when people survive exile. The response hit like a blade. Sharp. Controlled. Deserved. Kael lowered his eyes. Guilt flooded through him. Because she wasn't wrong. Not even slightly. For the first time in years, the Alpha King had no defense. No justification. No excuse. Only regret. And that frightened him more than any enemy ever could. Unfortunately, they weren't the only people preparing for war. Hidden inside her private chambers, Seraphine stared at reports arriving from every corner of the kingdom. Fear spread through her chest. Real fear. For the first time. Because Lyra's return was changing everything. The people loved her. The wolves followed her. The clans obeyed her. And worst of all, Kael looked at her the same way he had 3 years ago. Perhaps even more intensely. The realization made Seraphine's hands shake. She had lost control.
So she made a decision.
A final decision. If she could not control the kingdom, she would burn it. And if she could not possess the Alpha King, nobody would. Hours later, secret messages traveled across Frostfang. Hidden allies moved into position. Bribes were delivered. Soldiers were bought. Traitors awakened. And, beneath the palace itself, Fenrir disappeared. The great wolf vanished without a trace. By dawn, the entire kingdom would learn a horrifying truth. The wolf had been kidnapped. And the coup had already begun. The kingdom woke to panic. Church bells thundered across Frostfang before sunrise. Soldiers flooded the streets. Castle gates slammed shut. Torches burned through the darkness. And everywhere the same terrifying rumor spread.
Fenrir was gone.
The Alpha King's great wolf had vanished. No tracks. No witnesses. No explanation. Only silence. The kind of silence that comes before kingdoms collapse. Because Fenrir was not merely a wolf. He was a symbol. A legend. A living extension of the king's soul. And somewhere deep inside Frostfang Palace, Kael dropped to one knee as agony ripped through his body. His hand slammed against cold stone. Pain exploded through his chest. His vision blurred. For a terrifying moment, he couldn't breathe. The spiritual bond connecting him to Fenrir strained violently. Like a chain being ripped apart. Like half his soul was being dragged away into darkness. Nearby guards rushed forward. "Your Majesty," Kael shoved them away. His silver eyes burned with fury. Because he already knew. This wasn't kidnapping. This was war. Across the palace, Lyra stood upon a balcony overlooking the chaos below. Snow swirled through the city. People ran through the streets. Fear spread faster than fire. Something terrible had finally arrived. The moment she had spent years preparing for. Behind her, northern warriors waited. Wolf clans waited. Ancient allies waited. all watching their queen, waiting for her command. The frightened Omega girl who once feared judgment was gone. This woman inspired loyalty, confidence, hope. Yet beneath her calm exterior, old emotions stirred, because she knew exactly who stood behind this. Seraphine, the final piece of the puzzle, the architect of every wound, every lie, every betrayal, every death. The time for shadows had ended. Far below the palace, deep within forgotten tunnels beneath Frostfang, Duchess Seraphine smiled. Torches flickered against ancient walls. Chains rattled. And imprisoned behind enchanted barriers stood Fenrir. The great wolf growled, golden eyes burning with hatred. Yet even he could not break the magic surrounding him. Ancient runes glowed across iron pillars. Dark magic. Forbidden magic. Magic Seraphine had secretly gathered for years. Everything had led to this moment. The Duchess stepped forward. Elegant. Beautiful. Terrifying. You should have died in that ravine. Fenrir snarled. The sound shook the chamber. But Seraphine only laughed. Unfortunately for all of us. Her smile widened. She saved you. The wolf's eyes narrowed. Because somehow, he understood. By midday the kingdom exploded into open rebellion. Traitors emerged from every corner of the capital. Soldiers turned against commanders. Nobles chose sides. Fires erupted across districts. Blood-stained, snow-covered streets. The coup had begun, exactly as Seraphine intended. And at the center of it all stood Kael, sword in hand, armor covered in frost, silver eyes colder than death itself. The Alpha King had finally stopped running from pain, stopped hiding from regret, stopped pretending. And now everyone around him felt the consequences. Enemies fell. Traitors fled. Entire battalions retreated before his fury. Yet none of it mattered, because only one thing occupied his mind. Lyra. And the horrifying possibility that he might lose her forever, just as he had lost everything else. The final confrontation came at sunset, at the Ravine of Endless Ice, the place where destiny first awakened, the place where everything began. Snowstorms roared across the cliffs. Lightning flashed through black clouds. The abyss stretched endlessly below, ancient, silent, watching. Thousands gathered around its edge. Soldiers, wolves, citizens, nobles, everyone. History itself seemed to hold its breath, because standing upon the frozen platform above the ravine stood Seraphine, and beside her, bound in chains, Fenrir. The great wolf roared. The sound echoed across mountains. Then Seraphine laughed, the madness inside her finally visible. No masks remained. No lies remained. Only obsession. Only hatred. Only desperation. You all want truth? Her voice carried through the storm. Then listen. The crowd fell silent. And for the first time, Seraphine confessed. Everything. The conspiracy. The forged letters. The murdered guard. The manipulation. The lies. Even the death of Kael's former mate. Each confession struck the kingdom like thunder. Gasps spread. Shock erupted. People stared in horror. The monster had never been hidden outside the palace. The monster had lived inside it. All along, Kael stood frozen. Not because he doubted her words. Because hearing them confirmed his greatest fear. Lyra had been innocent. Always. Every accusation. Every punishment. Every moment of suffering. His fault. The realization nearly broke him. 3 years. 3 years she endured exile because he chose fear over trust. 3 years. The guilt became unbearable. And when he looked toward Lyra, he expected hatred, expected anger, expected condemnation. Instead, he saw sadness, which somehow hurt far more. Seraphine noticed, and snapped. The sight of them looking at each other shattered what remained of her sanity. If she could not have the throne, no one would. If she could not possess Kael, no one would. With a scream, she unleashed the final spell. Dark energy exploded across the ravine. Ice shattered. The platform collapsed. Chaos erupted. People screamed. Soldiers scattered. And Lyra disappeared over the edge. Time stopped. Kael saw only one thing. Her.
Falling.
The same abyss. The same darkness. The same impossible choice. But unlike before, he did not hesitate, not even for a heartbeat. The Alpha King jumped. The crowd gasped. The ruler of Frostfang launched himself into the ravine without thought, without fear, without concern for his own life. Only hers. Always hers. Wind screamed past him. Ice walls blurred. Darkness swallowed everything. And finally, he caught her. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her against him, protecting her, holding her, just as he should have done years ago. The impact came moments later.
Kael twisted his body,
shielding Lyra from the collision. Stone shattered beneath them. Pain exploded through his chest. A sickening crack echoed through the abyss. Blood-stained snow. For the first time in anyone's memory, the invincible Alpha King fell. Above them the battle continued. Below them silence returned. Lyra opened her eyes. Immediately panic flooded her chest.
Kael.
No response. Fear struck harder. Kael. Blood covered his armor. His breathing weakened. His eyes remained closed. The sight shattered something inside her. Because despite everything, despite betrayal, despite exile, despite pain, she still loved him. She always had. The truth could no longer be denied. Tears filled her eyes. For the first time in years, the Ice Queen broke. Her hands trembled as ancient silver light emerged from her body. Moon Queen magic.
Pure.
Ancient. Beautiful. The power surrounded Kael. Healing wounds. Mending broken bones. Restoring what should have been lost. The prophecy itself answered her grief. And slowly, very slowly, the Alpha King's eyes opened. The first thing he saw was Lyra.
Crying.
For him, the realization hit harder than any battlefield wound. Because after everything, she still cared. His voice barely worked. Yet he forced the words out. I was wrong. The confession cracked.
Raw.
Broken. Human. I failed you. More tears escaped Lyra's eyes. Kael reached for her hand. Not as a king. Not as a ruler. Not as an alpha. As a man. A flawed man. A guilty man. A man desperately seeking redemption. I loved you. The words echoed through the ancient ravine.
The truth at last.
No pride. No fear. No walls. Only honesty. I loved you then. His voice shook. I love you now. Silence followed. Beautiful silence. The kind that changes lives. Then Lyra finally smiled through tears. A real smile. The first one he had seen in years. And somehow it felt like sunrise after endless winter. By dawn the war was over. Seraphine was defeated. Her crimes exposed before the entire kingdom. Her power destroyed. Her reign of manipulation ended forever. Fenrir was freed. The great wolf returned. And peace slowly began healing Frostfang. Several weeks later, the entire kingdom gathered before the royal palace. Snow drifted softly from gray skies. Thousands filled the square, waiting, watching, witnessing history. At the top of the palace steps stood King Kael Draven. Beside him stood Lyra, not as an exile, not as an Omega, not as a forgotten girl, as a queen, as his equal, as the woman who saved his soul. The crowd fell silent. Then something impossible happened. The feared Alpha King lowered himself to one knee. Before everyone. Before nobles. Before soldiers. Before the entire kingdom. Gasps spread. Nobody had ever seen the king kneel. Yet he did. Without hesitation. Without shame. Without pride. Kael looked up at Lyra. Silver eyes filled with devotion. And for the first time in his life, the king chose love over fear. The crowd erupted. Cheers echoed across Frostfang. The kingdom witnessed not weakness, not surrender, but redemption. That night peace settled over the mountains. Fenrir stood beside the palace cliffs, golden eyes fixed toward distant northern horizons, toward lands hidden beyond snow and legend. Something ancient stirred there, something sleeping, something waiting. The great wolf sensed it immediately. Another prophecy. Another destiny. Another story. Beginning. Far away beneath northern stars. And somewhere in the darkness, ancient eyes slowly opened.
The end.
Wolf face crowned snowflake crescent moon red heart.